Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the Computer Guy, here for the Daily Blob, where we truly believe in truth, justice, and the American way. What is the definition of the American way again? Oh, it's making a shit ton of money off of ethnic cleansing? Yeah, that sounds about right. Truth, justice, making a metric crap ton of money off of ethnic cleansing. That's what we believe in here at the Daily Blob. Anyways, I think this is an interesting story. And it's an interesting question, too, for so many of the people that might be watching this, or CEOs, CTOs. This whole question of what happens when we move into a software as a service environment, and then you find out that the software that you are providing as a service is being used to target in order to kill, Palestinian babies. Like, what do you do? What do you do with that information? Like, it's kind of weird, right? Back in the day when you just sold server software, like if I sold server hardware and if I sold server software and I did just a tiny bit, just the tiniest bit of know your customer, right? Then it wasn't really my responsibility anymore. If I didn't know I was selling it to the Klan, if I didn't know I was selling it to the Zionists, I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's being used for things that I would prefer it's not used for. But at the end of the day, look, I was selling a legal product. They purchased a legal product, and that's all I have to worry about, right? The curious thing now, though, is when you're doing software as a service or infrastructure as a service, metal as a service, and platform as a service, AAS, right? If you're doing any of these AAS things, not only are you selling that thing, but you are actually maintaining and managing it, right? Every single day, you touch the services that are being used to starve a civilian population, right? So if somebody buys your software and your hardware, and then they take it way away, they take it 1,000 miles away, they take it halfway the world away, and they use it in order to starve a population, how much control do you have? Like, oops, I'll try not to do that again. That's about all you can say. On the other hand, what if that exact same process is going on, but now it's going on within your own data centers, right? When we look at Microsoft, support of the ethnic cleansing going on in Gaza and the destruction that's going to be going on in the West Bank, it's very easy to say, oh, well, that's a Microsoft problem. Microsoft is bad. One of the things to be considering, though, is think about your companies. Like, in your company, who do you actually support? It's kind of a question to be pondering. So this is coming from The Guardian, a lot of other places. 1 million calls an hour. Israel relying on Microsoft Cloud for expansive surveillance of Palestinians, right? See, the idea is... the Israelis came up with this system to literally try to be able to record 1 million calls per hour. They did not have the data centers to be able to support that amount of data coming in, and so they basically are now piping it into Azure's data centers so they can store as much data as possible. One of the fascinating things you think about now in the modern world, especially with intelligence gathering, is with things like artificial intelligence or any other automation routines, is that it is now easier to pull out information from these massive troves of data, right? I think about this, right? So I was in the Army back in the 90s, and I did communications repair. So we talked about things like, the intelligence folks intercepting signals and all that type of deal. But what's kind of curious, though, is back in the 90s, one of the biggest problems for the intelligence folks is technologically the problem wasn't intercepting communications, right? I think there was something called Echelon at the time at NSA. Anyways, with Echelon or any of these other programs, intercepting communications wasn't really a big deal. But the problem is you only had so many intelligence operators to deal with so much data coming in. So one of the things they had to do is they had to prioritize simply what messages, what communications they would even bother listening to find out if there was an issue, right? So they may have collected information that was valuable, but it could end up literally getting deleted a couple of months later because nothing had pointed to that call or that communication possibly containing valuable information. And so even though they collected it, it just kind of went in the dustbin of history. What becomes interesting now with the LLMs and all this kind of artificial intelligence stuff is what happens not only when Israel can record 1 million calls per hour of Palestinians, but then it can use artificial intelligence to go through and try to parse all of that information. Not only parse that information, but then start dumping that into databases so that they can start correlating that information with other things. And what happens, right, when you have the Palestinians, when you have a people that basically are under a martial law regime, so they don't really have normal civilian laws and normal judicial review like they should have. What happens, when a kill order comes in, and who gets to decide whether or not that is legitimate? One of the things I've talked about before for a lot of people in the United States, right? I talk about this thing like security in the United States, and Americans get all up in arms. And one of the things I try to explain is like when you're around the rest of the world, a lot of the security doesn't matter the way you think it does, right? I don't have to break your password. I just have to break your fingers. I just have to continue breaking your fingers until you give me your password. Right here in the United States, right? If you have an encrypted drive and you have a password on that encrypted drive, you can be thrown in prison for contempt of court if you don't hand over that password. But we're very limited to the actual punishments we can put on you. So if you know the information on that hard drive might cause you problems, you simply do a contempt of court violation, and you rot in prison for a while, but you'll probably get out before you get out for whatever the hell's on that hard drive. The curious thing is, again, if you're in other places, around the world, they don't have to break the password on your hard drive. They can just break your fingers. And then when they're done breaking all your fingers, they're like, but Eli, I'm an alpha. I will not break if they break my fingers. Sure. Call of Duty Ranger right there. But anyways, even if you don't give them the password after they've broken all your fingers, then they realize, oh wow, the stuff that's on that hard drive must be really bad, so we're just going to chuck you in prison for the rest of your life and be done with it, right? And what do you have? What legal recourse do you have? And this is one of the things that becomes very interesting with the whole Israel thing and the Palestinian thing, especially right now, right? The Knesset, was it 2 weeks ago now? They literally, it was a ceremonial or whatever. They voted to annex the West Bank into Israel, and it wasn't a real vote. It was just a symbolic vote. Right, but the interesting part with that too is not only did they say they're going to annex the West Bank, so that's not Gaza, West Bank here, Gaza here, West Bank to Israel, but then they said that all the historic lands of Israel should be brought back into the fold of Israel. Right, and that's literally what they're stating. And then what happens to all the Palestinians that are in those lands that Israel is going to illegally annex? And do they have rights? What are the Palestinians' rights there? And then what happens? What happens when Microsoft is now supporting the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians? I don't know. So things to ponder. And as I've said before, you might be like, well, see, this is why you should put apartheid in your auto signature. No, what I'm trying to explain to you is Microsoft is making lots and lots and lots of money killing Palestinians. Your job, if you work for Microsoft, I just want you to think about this for a second. If you work for Microsoft, your pay and benefits is coming from the slaughtering of Palestinians. I mean, you have agency in your own life. See, here's the thing about the Palestinians. The fucked up thing about the truly fucked up thing about the Palestinians in Gaza, they can't even be refugees, right? The Israelis are so nasty to these people, they cannot even flee. Think about this, right? The bombing, the shit show going on in Syria, they flee to Europe, right? That may be a horrible process. People may die along the way, but they had the freedom and they had the agency to be able to flee. Iraqis who flee, the Afghanis who flee, the Libyans who flee, no matter how horrible that was, no matter how god-awful that was, no matter what happened during the process, they had the freedom, and if they had the agency, they were able to flee. The Gazans have no ability to even flee. They don't get the right to run the fuck away. So anyways, if you're with Microsoft right now, just remember, you are getting paid your money is getting paid from the slaughter of Palestinian babies. If you're comfortable with that, cool. But I should be, that's why I should put apartheid into my auto signature. Yeah, but they're making a lot of money off of this. Here's the thing, that's the whole thing. Like, you got to think about like real politics, real world, real politic. Like, you come to me asking how to get a job. Eli, how do I get a job? Well, what you got to understand is they're making money from slaughtering Palestinians. They're making money from providing the support infrastructure for slaughtering Palestinians. That's where your paycheck comes from. Ergo, if you want to keep a job, you might want to shut the fuck up. What? Oh, right, that's true. Right, if you can handle that, take your agency. Take the agency that you have to put your resume on LinkedIn. Put your resume on LinkedIn. I don't know. The life is screwed up. The world is screwed up. But yeah, it is. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you? One afternoon in late 2021, so this is recently, Microsoft's chief executive, Satya Nadella, met with the commander of Israel's military surveillance agency, Unit 8200, on the spy chief's agenda, moving vast amounts of top-secret intelligence material into the U.S. Company's cloud. Meeting at Microsoft's headquarters near Seattle, Yossi Sariel won Nadella's support for a plan that would grant Unit 8200 access to a customized and segregated area within Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. Armed with Azure's near limitless storage capacity, Unit 8200 began building a powerful new mass surveillance tool, a sweeping and intrusive system that collects and stores recordings of millions of mobile phone calls made each day by Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Revealed here for the first time in an investigation by The Guardian with the Israeli-Palestinian publication 972 magazine and Hebrew language outlet Local Call, the cloud-based system, which first became operational in 2022, enables Unit 8200 to store a giant trove of calls daily for extended periods of time. Microsoft claims Nadella was unaware of what kind of data Unit 8200 planned to store in Azure, but a cache of leaked Microsoft documents and interviews with 11 sources from the company and Israeli military intelligence reveals how Azure has been used by Unit 8200 to store the expansive archive of everyday Palestinian communications. And that's one of the things with CEOs. That's one of the things with business people, right? They're like, I don't know what they said. I did not hear what they said. So we had a negotiation about what rate we would charge them for storage buckets, and so we basically just sold them storage buckets for a large amount of data. I don't know what that data is for. It's amazing. If you try to sell a GPU, like, think about this. If you try to sell a GPU in the modern world, you might go the fuck to jail, right? With this whole thing with the US and export control laws to China. Trying to sell a GPU to China might land your ass in jail. Microsoft can make God knows how much money collecting Palestinians' civilian communications, and they're like, Well, let's see here. According to 3 Unit 8200 sources, the cloud-based storage platform has facilitated the preparation of deadly airstrikes and has shaped military operations in Gaza and the West Bank. Thanks to the control it exerts over Palestinian communications infrastructure, Israel has long intercepted phone calls in the occupied territories, but the indiscriminate new system allows intelligence officers to play back the content of cellular calls made by Palestinians, capturing the conversations of a much larger pool of ordinary civilians. Intelligence sources with knowledge of the project said Unit 8200's leadership turned to Microsoft after concluding it did not have sufficient storage space or computing power on the military servers to bear the weight of entire population's phone calls. It's like, well, when you're going to record the phone calls of an entire population, I guess Azure is your answer. Several intelligence officers from the unit, which is comparable to the U.S. NSA in its surveillance capabilities, said that a mantra emerged internally that captured the project's scale and ambition: 1 million calls an hour. The system was built to sit on Microsoft servers behind enhanced layers of security developed by the company's engineers with Unit 8200's instructions. A senior Microsoft source said the company had held conversations with Israeli defense officials and stipulated how its technology should be used in Gaza, insisting Microsoft systems must not be employed for the identification of targets for lethal strikes. So you're just going to give them access to your cloud. You're going to tell them what they shouldn't use this. You shouldn't use this for ethnic cleansing. And then you're going to take your paycheck and walk the fuck away. Okay, fair enough. However, Unit 8200 sources said intelligence drawn from the enormous repositories of phone calls held in Azure had been used to research and identify bombing targets in Gaza. One of the sources said that when planning an airstrike on an individual located within densely populated areas where high numbers of civilians are present, officers would use the cloud-based system to examine calls made by people in the immediate vicinity. The sources also said use of the system had increased during the campaign in Gaza. But the initial focus of the system was the West Bank, where an estimated 3 million Palestinians live under Israeli military occupation. Illegal Israeli military occupation, which isn't going to be illegal very long. The occupation is going to end when they simply annex the damn place. So it's currently illegally occupied, and so they're going to change that by illegally annexing it, and that'll make everything better. Let's see here. The Unit 8200 sources said the information stored in Azure amounted to a rich repository of intelligence about its population that some in the unit claimed had been used to blackmail people, place them in detention, or even justify their killing after the fact. Quote, when they need to arrest someone and there isn't a good enough reason to do so, that's where they find the excuse. Following a 2015 wave of deadly so-called lone wolf attacks by lone Palestinians, many of whom were teenagers unknown to the security services, Sariel had overseen a significant expansion of the volume of Palestinian communications that Unit 8200 intercepted and stored. His answer was to begin, quote, tracking everyone all the time, right? So think about this if you're a Palestinian, right? You want to talk about a dystopian state. If you're a Palestinian, you're being tracked. All of you are being tracked all the time by a group of people that essentially want you dead. I wonder why they have issues. I wonder why they're concerned. And an officer who worked for Sariel said an officer worked for Sariel at the time. Instead of traditional surveillance for specific targets, Sariel's project relied on mass surveillance of Palestinians in the West Bank and used novel AI methods to extract insights. Suddenly, the entire public was our enemy. Right? And we talk about the ethnic cleansing, right? The entire public is our enemy. We talk about intent. We talk about organizational culture. What happens with intent when your organizational culture is that all of them are the enemy? One system developed in this period, sources said, scanned all text messages between Palestinians and the West Bank and assigned each message a risk rating based on an automated analysis of whether it included words deemed to be suspicious. Still in use, a system known as Noisy Message can identify text messages in which people talk about weapons or discuss wanting to die. When Sariel became Unit 8200 commander in early 2021, he prioritized forging a partnership with Microsoft that would give the unit the ability to go further and capture and analyze the content of millions of phone calls each. At his meeting with Nadella later that year, Sariel does not appear to have explicitly stated his plan to store Palestinian phone calls in the cloud, referring instead to, quote, sensitive workloads of secret data. But documents suggest that Microsoft engineers understood the data stored in Azure would include raw intelligence, including audio files, while some Israel-based Microsoft staff, including alumni of Unit 8200, appear to have known about what the unit hoped the joint project would achieve. Quote, you don't have to be a genius to figure it out, one source said. Quote, you tell Microsoft we don't have any more space in our servers, that it's audio files, it's pretty clear what it is. Files suggest that by July this year, 11,500 terabytes of Israeli military data, equivalent to approximately 200 million hours of audio, was held in Microsoft's Azure servers in the Netherlands, while a smaller proportion was stored in Ireland. According to the files, Unit 8200 informed Microsoft that it planned to move over time as much as 70% of its data, including secret and top secret data, into Azure, and was willing to, quote, push the envelope with the kind of sensitive and classified information that intelligence agencies normally held on their own servers. And Israel's destruction of Gaza's telecoms infrastructure has reduced the volume of phone calls in the territory, but sources said the information held in the cloud remained useful. According to one, enthusiasm for the system had grown among intelligence officers working on Gaza as the war progressed, and they saw the military is, quote, heading towards long-term control there. So there you go. There you go. Unit 8200 is storing 1 million calls per hour on Microsoft's cloud. Yay! Proud to be an American. Because at least I know our executives are making billions of dollars off of ethnic cleansing the way God would have wanted it. That's how you know we are a Christian nation. Anyways, that's kind of curious to take a look at and to see. And that's the thing, right? If you're Microsoft, this is what your company is doing. This is what your CEO finds an acceptable profit center for your company. And now you might be horrified, but isn't that why we should speak out? Probably not if you want to keep your job. What? I mean, that's the thing, right? This is how they are paying you. Right? 11,500 terabytes of data. That is just so much data. They're going to be transitioning 70% of their data storage over to Azure. That is so much money. That is so many jobs. Right? What a lot of the kids out there don't want to think about, a lot of the 40-year-olds don't want to think about, right, is the money that comes in, that revenue that comes in, that is literally what pays your salaries. If they cut off Israel, they're not going to cut off Israel, but if they did cut off Israel, that would probably be thousands upon thousands of job losses in the blink of an eye, because you no longer have that revenue coming in. And then if they actually had morals, and they cut Israel off from being able to use this, who else would they have to cut off? And all of a sudden it's going to be an absolute and utter bloodbath of employees. So it's just one of those things to sit there and to realize how the world actually works. The thing to really be considering, if you're working for some kind of services type company, is to be thinking about how can your services be used in ways that you might not be expecting and you might find morally or ethically repugnant. One of the interesting things with the whole idea right now in the U.S. being so anti-China, right? So we're trying not to sell AI hardware to China for whatever reason. Anyways, one of the interesting things is that there's a lot of like Chinese-based workloads that are now on cloud GPU farms, right? So if China can't buy H100 GPUs, they can take their training data and they can take the other information and they can basically, online ship it off to an online, a GPU service farm and basically get their models and stuff created that way. Right? That's one of the interesting things you start thinking about is when you're providing that services architecture, you fundamentally lose a lot of control that you would have had not that long ago when you just sold the hardware, right? And you have a more of a connection to the continued output than you would have before. So it's something to consider and something to think about. And it's also this whole idea, right? In this modern world of mass data collection and artificial intelligence, what happens when a population is not deemed to be human, right? The Palestinians are not human. Like, I've heard, right, as I say, I don't talk many times. I just sit back and listen. It is amazing the comments I've heard out of Israelis about how they really feel about their neighbors, and what happens when they're completely and utterly dehumanized, and how are you supporting that? How are you supporting the dehumanization of the people? So, anyways. One of those things to kind of ponder and to think about, and the real world. There's a movie. If you have not seen the movie, you should see it. It's called Thank You for Smoking. Great movie. Thank You for Smoking. Anyways, the guy in it talked about the yuppie Nuremberg defense. The defense I use all the time. Look, I got to pay my mortgage. Yes. Do I know that my product is directly involved in killing people? Of course. But I've got a mortgage to pay. Ergo, I'm going to show up at work tomorrow. And it's one of those things to kind of consider and ponder and to think about, right? Taking the agency that you have. If you don't believe in what your company is doing, you should probably be supporting a different company. But anyways, that's my thoughts. I'm sure I'll get a lot of horrible stuff. I'm sure I'll get a lot of horrible stuff in the comment section. Right there. Don't scream at the screen. Don't walk away and scream in the bathroom. If you're gonna scream, be a real man and scream in the comment section down below. Anyways, give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down, leave us an amazing comment, or say what a horrible, horrible fake you I really am. Eli, I could tell by the nose. That is an Ohio nose if I've ever seen an Ohio nose. Tell me about my nose down below. That's all I got for today. See y'all later.